So I think, Terry, if you're ready, we get started with you. Climate change, changing our birds and everything else. Wonderful. I've heard your presentation before, and that's why I wanted you to talk to our group too. Thank you for coming.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation very, very much. So, and I'm sorry you all can't see me, but boy, that's a relief. No. Anyway, I wanted to tell the audience too, thank you for being here. I want to talk to you about our climate since 1900s. And I use the time 1900s because that is basically when humans then started changing our climate. So before 1900s, humans didn't have much to do about it because there wasn't the Industrial Revolution. After the Industrial Revolution started getting really busy, then that's when our climate started changing. Then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about future climate change. And I do not have a clear crystal ball. I have a cloudy crystal ball, but I do have a crystal ball that I can say, well, maybe this will happen or maybe that'll happen. And if we do this, maybe that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then I want to go on, since I am a biologist, I got into this because I wanted to know what's happening with our birds and climate change. And that then expanded out to all of our other species, because we are not the only organism that is being affected by our climate change. Our birds and all the other species on the planet are being affected, and we need to talk about them and know what's happening to them, because it's not real fair that they're being affected by just one species, and that one species is Homo sapiens. Now, I have to warn you, segment 1, segment 2, and segment 3 of my talk are real downers. And so it's going to be kind of depressing to listen to all that. But if you just hold on, I promise you, when we get to segment 4, when it's talking about what we all must do, it will be very uplifting and it will be very encouraging, because there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of things we can do. We just have to do them. Now, this is a slide that I call my roadmap slide. And it basically is telling you what I've just spoken about and what I'm going to be speaking about in the future in the talk. And it has different kinds of species on it. Here we have a yellow-throated warbler. All of the species that are on my roadmap slides are species that if we go up to 3 degrees Celsius above natural, and by above natural, I mean before 1900s, then we could actually lose that species in Florida. So all of my roadmap slide species are on the brink of extinction in Florida. So now let's go on and talk about climate change since the 1900s. Well, we have very, very abnormal things going on right now, particularly in 2020. In Death Valley, California, on August 16th in 2020, we hit the highest temperature, reliable temperature, that we have ever recorded on the planet. This is reliable temperature. They have higher temperatures that were not as reliable, but it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Holy mackerel. When you think of the temperature of 104, just 104 degrees Fahrenheit, we start denaturing enzymes. So humans are lucky. We can go inside and we can sit in the air conditioning. But what about all the plants and the animals that were out literally cooking in Death Valley when this was happening? Because their enzymes truly were breaking down. So we are having incredible heat waves. The other thing that we know that's going on here in Florida is hurricanes. And while I was giving talks in October and November, I kept having to change the slide all the time. Basically, finally, we made the final, what do I want to say, record. We had a record that was set on Friday the 13th in November of 2020, when we had a 30th named storm called Iota out in the Atlantic Ocean. Holy moly, we had never had that many storms ever before in one season, named storms in one season. So we've been breaking records. So now we've had a lot of different abnormals. And as the climate is warming, what is going to happen is this is going to become our new abnormal, not our new normal, but our new, actually, basically our new normal abnormal. So we're going to have to start worrying about all these crazy things that are going to be happening. Now, what this is showing you is going to be showing you temperature in degrees C, and it is a difference from taking the average from 1850 to 1900, taking that average, and then taking the temperature, the actual temperature, and subtracting it from that average. And that is giving us what is shown here on that plot. And now I'll let it play again, and you can see that what happens is when we're early in the time period, and it's going to start here in just a second. In the 1800s, it's fairly cool, but then you can see it's still cool, but now it's getting warmer. Then it cools down again, and now all of a sudden it starts getting warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer, going out to 2017, almost making 1.5 degrees Celsius average global temperature. Now, in 1970, we had the very first Earth Day. So in 2019, it was 50 years since the very first Earth Day. And in that 50 years, the United States warmed by 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really warmed significantly over that 50-year period. Now, I don't have the actual data for the city, but what I have is closest is West Palm Beach. That's as close as I could get to where you all are. And what this shows is it warmed a little bit less than what the US average was. It was 2 degrees, not 2.4 degrees. And this is, again, since Earth Day. But now, if you look at just the winter warming, what you find is the average winter temperature in West Palm Beach has gone up 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit. That is really a huge change that has happened in that temperature. So things are warming in Florida, and they're certainly warming a lot more in the wintertime. And it is getting quite a bit warmer. And I think we all know that. I certainly know that here in Sarasota, it's a lot warmer. Now, as the land has been warming, the oceans have been warming also. And this is a slide that shows you what's gone on with the oceans. On almost all my slides, the x-axis shows you years. And on the y-axis, it is the change in heat content of the oceans relative to an average. The main thing I want you to see here is it goes from being cooler to getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, that is something that we have to be worried about here in Florida because of sea level rise. Because as you start warming water, the water expands, and the expanding water has to go someplace. And what happens is it goes up in sea level rise. Now, what is causing all of this warming, the warming of the land, the warming of the oceans? What is happening here? And what is happening happens to be us with the emissions of greenhouse gases. And what this is showing you, again, on the x-axis, it is years, it's just funny years. It has now all the way over in the right-hand side, and it goes all the way back to 800,000 years ago. Wow, 800,000 years ago. And this is all done with ice core, not all done with ice cores, but the older stuff is done with ice cores. And they can figure out what the concentration of CO2 is, and it's parts per million. And you can see for 800,000 years, the concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere was never above 300 parts per million until what I say is now. And when I say now, I literally mean now. These are data that I got off of the computer at about 3:45 this afternoon. And I got it off of what is called the Bloomberg Carbon Clock. And you too can go to the Bloomberg Carbon Clock and see how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. And right now we're at 416.7. So that's 417 parts per million right now. So we have jumped, we have skyrocketed up in how much CO2 emissions have gone out. Now, if you look at where that is coming from, again, on the x-axis, I have years going from 2019 back to 1990. And what I'm showing you is greenhouse gas emissions. And this is gigatons of CO2 E. There's a little E after the CO2. That means equivalent. So we're also taking into account here methane and water vapor and other greenhouse gases. It's basically all the greenhouse gases. And what it's doing is showing you by country how many emissions, how large the emissions have been for the different countries. So before 2000, the US was by far the highest. And now as China has their affluence of their population has skyrocketed, so has the emissions. Also, what has happened is that they are heating and electrifying their country with coal. And coal is a very, very, very dirty greenhouse gas fuel. So China has skyrocketed. But then comes the US, then the EU, and you can see then India, Russia, transportation, international transportation, and then we have Japan. Now, if you do it per person, it looks like this by country. And you can see how the US is way, way up there. And so what that is telling us is the greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere right now have primarily come from us in this country, from the US. That's where it's come from. So this is tons of CO2 equivalent per person. So Russia is high. Look at Japan. Japan is as affluent as we are, but yet they're much lower. They know how to not have so many emissions of greenhouse gases. So there's a lot to be learned from this plot right here. Okay, that tells us a little bit about climate change since 1900. Now let's switch to future climate change. And here we have a red-headed woodpecker that occurs in Florida in the summertime. And if we go up to 3 degrees Celsius above natural, the red-headed woodpecker will find it too warm in Florida and it will abandon Florida and will not be there any longer. That's what the Audubon study has shown. Okay, let's go on now and talk about future climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change is a group of scientists from all over the world. Literally, there were about, when I was working on it, I worked on it for 21 years as a volunteer. It's all volunteer work. The scientists get together every 7 years and write up a report saying what we know about climate change. And in 2006, they published this figure. Again, on the x-axis is years, and on the y-axis is CO2 equivalent in parts per million again. And what they're saying is we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but if we assume that everything goes as business as usual, we will stay along this black curve that goes up. That's what we will be on. If we don't change our ways, this is what's going to happen. So by 2100, we'll be up above 1,300 parts per million for CO2. Remember, right now, we're at about 417. That's a big jump, and we really, truly do not want to do that. So what the scientists who drew this came up with scenarios, and they have 2 scenarios. There's a blue one and a green one, and both of these are fairly similar to each other. There's subtle differences, but what it's saying is that we have a more egalitarian world where we share resources, we share research, we share technology, we help each other out, We realize that we're all in this together and we're going to work together to get us out of it. And if we do that, we will drop down from the business as usual curve and be on the blue or the green curve. Now, let's look at the red curve. The red curve is one that really scares me to death. The red curve is one that the scientists said in 2016, God clicked her fingers and stopped all CO2 equivalent gases from being emitted into our atmosphere. So she stopped all greenhouse gas emissions in 2016. Well, you would think that if she stopped all greenhouse gas emissions in 2016, that curve would drop rapidly. But look, it doesn't drop rapidly. It actually increases for a while, and then it starts decreasing about 2050. Why in the world doesn't it drop faster? The reason is because CO2 is a gas that when it gets into our atmosphere, stays there for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. So what we do today will greatly affect what is happening for 40 generations in the future. So that's 39 greats, great. You can say 39 greats, great grandchildren. So that's a lot of people that what we are doing right now is affecting. But that's a good thing in a way, because that gives us the impetus to actually do something now. And we can do things to stop this. And we really can do this. The trouble with CO2 is the main way that CO2 gets out of the atmosphere is by, it is collected by vegetation. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, this is a plot that is similar to the first one. Only thing is, these are not actual data, these are model data, and they go all the way out to 2100. But they fit what actually happened in the past. All of this is exactly what we saw before, coming out in 2017 to about 1.5 C. Now it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Holy cow! 2100, they think it's going to go all the way out to 5 degrees C. If we go out to 5 degrees C, the amount of suffering, the amount of trauma, the amount of turmoil, the amount of deaths, the amount of extinctions is going to be astronomical. We do not want to do that. We do not want to go beyond 2 degrees C, and that's pretty hot. We really want to stay at 1.5 degrees C. But if we do nothing and stay on business as usual, we'll go all the way out to 5 degrees C. If that doesn't give you enough impetus to do something, I don't know what actually will. Now, in Florida, we have to worry about sea level rise. So in 2018, we know that the sea level had risen 8 inches above what it was in 1880. You can assume that the person who's standing there looking out at the ocean is about 6 feet tall. Now, in 2050, we have different estimates of how high the sea level could be. And the low estimate, this was done in 2018. It has been revised recently to say that the low estimate is actually what the high estimate was in 2018. So the low estimate in 2018 was 19 inches. The high estimate, which is now assumed to be the low estimate, that all makes sense. The high estimate in 2018 was 31 inches. So right now, our low estimate is 31 inches. And you can say by 2050, we will be up 31 inches. Now, what about what happens in 2100? The low estimate is 6.5 feet. And again, the low estimate is assumed to be too low. It is actually assumed to be what used to be the high estimate, and the high estimate was 9 feet. So we can say that by 2100, the sea level will be 9 feet above what it was in 1880. This doesn't take into account storm surges or high tides, super high tides, whatever they're called. I don't remember the name of them. King tides. it just is assuming that if normal everyday sea level rise. So 9 feet will not be high enough for you to be above, given that there's going to be storm surges and king tides. Now, what will our coast look like around where you all live in 2100 with 9 feet of sea level rise? That's what it's going to look like. So right there is where Pelican Island Audubon House is, which means it's going to be under the sea level by 2100. Uh-oh, not good. Look at how much damage there's going to be with sea level rise. So we want to do something so that we don't have that much sea level rise. And the best way to do that is to not have high temperatures so that all of the ice is melting. We don't want that ice to melt. The trouble though is about a month and a half ago now, the scientists were talking about what's going on to the ice sheet in Greenland. And we have always been concerned about a tipping point for the ice sheet in Greenland. And they said about a month and a half ago that we have passed the tipping point, and no matter what happens now, Greenland is going to melt completely. The Greenland ice sheet is going to melt completely. I can talk to you about why that is, but that's what they are assuming now is going to happen. We have passed the tipping point. And that means that there is between 27 feet and 29 feet of sea level rise just in the Greenland ice sheet. If the Greenland ice sheet is melting, the Antarctic ice sheet is also going to be melting. So I'm not taking that into account. I'm just saying in the Greenland ice sheet, there's 27 to 29 feet of sea level rise. Now, if we look at Florida with 28 feet of sea level rise, that's what it looks like. Holy mackerel. We really, really don't want that to happen. So we really have got to get on board and do something. We have to do something about climate change. We know that the climate is warming. We know it is. And I would really like all of you, before I go on now, is to make a pact with me. Will you please make a pact with me to never, ever, ever again say that you believe in global warming or that you believe in climate change? It's not a belief, folks. It's a fact. And what I want you to do is say, oh, climate change is real. Climate change is happening, not I believe in climate change. So please make a pact with me today. It is a big difference. Facts matter, and this is a fact. We have climate change and global warming occurring. Okay, that's enough about future climate change. Let's now talk about our birds, our precious birds and other species. Here's the eastern towhee. If we go up to 3 degrees above natural in the summertime, around the globe, then in the summertime, the eastern towhee will no longer be occurring in Florida. Now, what about our birds and other species? I was lucky enough with my late husband in 1995 to go to the North Pole. And I took this picture showing you a polar bear out on ice that had just had a seal kill. And when seals are killed by polar bears, they literally fling blood and guts all over the place. And the little bird, I hope you can see the little bird, it's right here next to the polar bear, is a ivory gull. And the ivory gull makes its living by cleaning up all the blood and guts that the polar bear spills around. Well, we don't have any ice, so the polar bears aren't coming out onto the ice to kill seals. Bad for the polar bears, but it's good for the seals. But the other species it's bad for is the ivory gull. The ivory gull abundance is plummeting, just absolutely plummeting in abundance. And I'm 66, and if I live to, I don't know, whatever my natural lifespan should be, I will bet you $1 million that the ivory gull has gone extinct in my lifetime. That's how rapidly extinctions are happening. It's not good, and it's something we can do something about. Now, in 2000, between 2017 and 2018, a study came out that used the breeding bird survey and the Christmas bird count data and found that from 1970 to 2010, we lost almost 3 billion birds. This is individuals, not species, individuals. Almost 3 billion birds since 1970. Is it due to climate change? Just a little bit. But what else is it due to? It's also due to habitat destruction. And I will take away a little bit of my thunder that I'm going to talk about later. Another thing that is causing all of these billions to die are cats. But habitat destruction is a big one. But losing almost 3 billion species since 1970, that means that 1 in 4 birds are actually gone. I don't really like this figure that I'm showing you right now because it looks like you've lost an entire species. We're not losing species, we're losing individuals. So the number of blue jays, for instance, there's only 3/4 of what used to be there. And for juncos, there's only 3/4 of the juncos that used to be there. So we have lost that many species, that many individuals in that time period. That's a lot. And now all of our birds are coping with that on top of now dealing with climate change. Now, what happens with climate change? Well, one of the things that happen, and I think we all know this, is it changes the timing of things in the spring. This is a study that was done looking in 2019, and it was looking at all of the data for Europe and for North America on when migration arose, or when species arrived on migration in Europe and in North America. And what they did was they set in 1960, they set that average value for all of those to 0. And then they wanted to see what happens. And what you can see is the slope is going down and down and down and down and down and down. So what's happened over that time period is we have shifted the timing of migration and breeding and all sorts of things earlier by about 2 to 2.5 weeks. That's a huge shift. That's a huge shift. But that's one of the things that has happened over this lifetime from 1960. The other thing that has happened is that species are changing their ranges. They're moving around. In the northern hemisphere, they're going north. They're also going up in elevation. In the southern hemisphere, they're going south. In the oceans, they're going deeper where it's cooler. In 1985, a colleague of mine at Princeton did a study on a mountain range in Peru. And he found that the common scale-backed antbird went up about 800 meters. The versicolored barbet went up about 1250 meters. And on top of the mountain was the variable antshrike, and it went up to the top of the mountain, which was 1400 meters. Now, he did this study so well, we knew where the transect was. So people went back and did it again in 2017 and found that just like we expected, the common scale-backed antbird has shifted up. The versicolored barbet has shifted up all the way to the top of the mountain, and there's no place for the variable antshrike anymore. It has popped off the top of the mountain. It is now no longer on that mountain. So that has been happening on a lot of mountains, and it is causing not just extirpations, but it's also causing extinctions, not just of birds, but of other animals and of plants, primarily on the tops of mountains. Now, the other thing is that plants and animals have been able to survive warming for eons. They have been moving around. They move their ranges. We know they move their ranges. But nowadays, they have to move through things like this. We have put huge scars on the land. Can you imagine yourself being a butterfly and trying to fly across this city? There are 2 butterflies that have gone extinct that used to be in Baja California, and they couldn't get across the cities of Tijuana and San Diego. So they went extinct because it got too warm for them down in Baja California. Now, what we need to do, every single one of us needs to do is, when you want to plant a plant outside that you're not going to eat, please, 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 only plant native plants, sorry. Only plant native plants. And I was impressed that you have all these native trees that are available to you. I just planted a mahogany tree, and I'm really excited about it. It's a beautiful little tree, and I'm so excited about it growing. I actually took out my front yard and put in all native plants. How did I know what the native plants were to plant? I went to audubon.org/plants for birds, typed in my zip code, and it gave me a list of all the native plants. I took that to the native plant store and said, these are the plants I want. I got them, planted them, and now we have 12 different species of butterflies in my front yard. We now have green anoles back again in my front yard. We do still have brown anoles, but the green anoles are there now too. So we are having a lot more of the insects and the reptiles, and the birds are coming in too. So this is something we need to do. So please make a pact with me. We don't need any more Scheffleras planted in Florida. Absolutely none. What we need to do is plant native plants. The birds' lives rely on them. They have to have them. If they don't have them, they're not going to have the food they need, and they're going to starve and die. Now, I've been talking to you a little bit about the Audubon study that was done. It was called Survival by Degrees, and it was a very elegant study. I'll talk to you about it more, but what the bottom line is if we go up 3 degrees C above natural, then 389 birds in North America will be on the brink of extinction. That is exactly 2/3 of all of our birds in North America will be on the brink of extinction if we go up 3 degrees C above natural. We're already 1.2 degrees C above natural. We don't have far to go. So we've got to be careful. We have got to start working and really making a difference here. Now, this study was an absolutely gorgeous study. It was done very, very well. It had over 140 million observations from the tip of Alaska all the way down to, what's the name of the peninsula? You know, the peninsula in Mexico. Anyway, I can't come up with it. Yucatan Peninsula. Sorry about that. An older woman episode there. Sorry about that. Anyway, they had a lot of observations. The other thing that they had was they had information on climate. They had information on vegetation, human land use, and they also had information on group specific variables is what they called them. So this is an example of water. So if you had lake birds or stream birds, this is the data that they used. And all of this is done at a 1 kilometer squared resolution. So that means you can go on audubon.org/climate/survival by degrees, type in your zip code, and it will tell you what's going to happen to your birds. Now, I've actually done that for you all. And here's an example. This is the current summer range of the yellow-throated warbler. And you can see that it occurs in Florida. And if we go up by 3 degrees, this study found that the yellow-throated warbler the range will look something like this. The red will have been lost, 92% holy mackerel, of the yellow-throated warbler will be lost. 8% will be stable, and it will gain 19%. So the yellow-throated warbler is going to shift. It will shift north, but it still isn't going to be covering nearly as much ground as it had before. This is for 3 degrees above natural, which is equivalent to 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if we only go up 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above natural, then we'll only lose 53% of the range, which is a huge difference for the bird. 48% will be stable, and we will gain 15%. So we'll still lose it from Florida, but yet it's going to be a more stable bird, much, much more stable. Now, when I put in your area, so for the Indian River County, we found out that at 3 degrees above natural, there are 8 highly vulnerable summer species. They include the snail kite, the boat-tailed grackle, those are both due to sea level rise, fish crow, red-headed woodpecker, brown thrasher, yellow-throated warbler, eastern towhee, and gray kingbird. Now, what happens if we only go up 1.5 degrees? Well, if we only go up 1.5 degrees, we are only going to be losing from the Indian River County 5 highly vulnerable species, and they include the snail kite again, the least tern, which again is due to sea level rise, fish crow, yellow-throated warbler, and gray kingbird. So we really don't want to go up above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now we need to talk specifically about extinctions. Extinctions are something that happen to all species. All species will go extinct, but biologists have quantified what background extinction rate is. The background extinction rate is losing less than 1 species in 1,000 species over 1,000 years. So if you have 1,000 species on a huge island and you watch those 1,000 species for 1,000 years, less than 1 species will go extinct. So now let's talk about what the current extinction rate is. The current extinction rate is about 1 species in 10 species over a little bit less than 100 years. Wow, that's 3 orders of magnitude faster is how fast our current extinction rate is. Now, in 2007, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change came out with a report and said that when we go up 2 degrees C above natural, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above natural, we could lose about 500,000 species. And if we go up 4 degrees C above natural, we could lose 1 million species. Now, we know the names of about 2 million species. So those are the numbers of species that we're really worried about here. So if we go up 2 degrees, we could lose 1/4 of the species. If we go up 4 degrees above natural, we could lose half the species on the planet. I can guarantee you that in half the species, if we lose half the species on the planet, that some of those species we humans will need to stay alive. The other question that I want to pose to you is, what gives us the right, 1 species, to cause the extinction of that many species? That to me is a real tough moral quandary. It's something we really need to be stopping. So now I've gone through 1, 2, and 3 phases of this talk, and I warned you, you were going to be kind of depressed. And I also said, hold on, we're going to be okay, because I know what I want to do is I want to talk about what we all must do. And what we all must do is we have to have a paradigm shift. We've had paradigm shifts in the past, lots of them, because we had the political will to have them. Here's an example. In World War I, food will win the war. We observe meatless days, wheatless days, and porkless days. So here is a paradigm shift brought on by World War I. We decided as a country, it would be patriotic to stop eating meat, stop eating wheat, and stop eating pork, because we wanted to save all of those resources for the boys over there. And we did it. Woohoo! We had a paradigm shift. Here's another example of a paradigm shift that happened much, much more recently. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. Holy moly. This is an example of two paradigm shifts. One, we have stopped public smoking. It's no longer okay to smoke in public anymore. Woohoo! That's wonderful, because it was causing a lot of illness and death. The other thing this shows is, look at the woman's lib here. I bet you all the women in the audience right now are saying, if some man comes up and blows smoke in my face, there's no way in the world I'm going to follow him anywhere. So we have two paradigm shifts. We've done it before. We can do it again. We just have to have the political will to do it. We also have to know what to do. And that brings me to this slide, which to me is one of the most hopeful slides in my whole presentation. It shows the tons of CO2 emissions per capita in 2016. They don't have any data out more recently than that, than 2016. On the x-axis is location, and on the y-axis is the ton of CO2 emissions per capita. So we have Washington, D.C. is the lowest, New York City is higher, and California is a smidgen higher than that. And then we have Florida, then we have the entire US. So now Florida, California, New York, DC are all knowing things to do to actually decrease the amount of CO2 emissions per capita. Then you look on the other side. Look at how Mississippi is compared to Florida. Florida is doing something right. Mississippi's not. Then holy cow, look at West Virginia, North Dakota, and Wyoming. All of them are doing things horribly. The main thing they are doing is they are using coal. Wyoming basically, well, not in 2016. In 2014 was only using coal. It changed over a bit to natural gas, so it's not as high as it used to be, but it still is very high. The other thing is that I used to teach at Stanford University. And so when I was in California and I'd show a slide like this, I'd say, you know, in California, we've never met a regulation we don't love. California doesn't mind regulating because it knows how important it is to try to save the planet. So we know what we have to be doing. California, New York, DC, Florida to some extent knows what to do. We just all have to do it. So that's really good news. That's really, really good news. Now, in October of 2018, the scientists with the Ipcc decided to come out with a report saying, you guys aren't listening to us. You have to understand what we have to do, because we have to change something, because we're talking about the fate of our planet, of all life on our planet. And so in October of 2018, they came up with a recipe of what to do. So what they said, that we needed really, really big changes. In 2010, the gigatons of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere were a little bit less than 40. 2017, went the wrong direction, went higher. And what they said in October of 2018 is by 2030, we have to have the gigatons of CO2 to only be 45% of what it was in 2010. So in 9 years, we have to drop down our gigatons of CO2. Can we do that? I doubt it in the US, but we may be able to do it in the world. And that's a very sad statement, because America used to be the leaders. we need to regain our leadership in all of this because we can do it. We just have to be able to do it. It's going to be tough. And maybe with this economic downturn, maybe getting us back on the road to recovery from our economic downturn by using green jobs, maybe we can do this. I don't know. But what the scientists said too in this report is by 2050, we have to be to zero. This is going to be very difficult because we're a very plastic society. We use a lot of plastics. And for every pound of plastic that is generated, we put 6 pounds of CO2 into our atmosphere. So it's going to be tough because the plastics come from fossil fuels. So somehow making that to be zero in 2050 is going to be a hard thing to do. But we're creative, we can do it. Okay, so now let's look at where the greenhouse gas sources are coming from in the US. Electricity is 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation is 29, agriculture is 9, commerce and residential are 12, and industry is 22. Now, pretty much all of those we can do something about, except industry. Industry is a tough one because in here we have things like making cement, which puts up a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere, and making steel, things like that. It's very, very difficult nut to crack. But all the others, we really can do something about it. And here's what some of the scientists said that we can do. For the electricity market, we have to have the percent of non-biomass renewables. Now, by non-biomass renewables, I mean hydroelectric, solar, wind, geothermal, and nuclear. So those are the 5 that we need to be having. So the percent of those renewables by 2030 have to be about 55%, 48 to 60%. And by 2050, it needs to be about 75%, 63 to 81%. I gave a talk to wind industry. There were about 400 people in the audience. And when I put this slide up, they literally all laughed. And I said, wait, this isn't a joke slide. I really mean this. And a friend of mine in the back of the auditorium stood up and said, Terry, that's absolutely impossible in the US. That's impossible in the US because we haven't had the political will to do something about this. We've got to get our political will to get a paradigm shift and make it work. And in Florida, we need to get our power companies, for instance, like Florida Power and Light, to be supportive of having people put solar on their houses. But they are not supportive of it now at all. And we need to do something about that. But can we do this? In the US, we may not be able to do this by 2030, but hopefully by 2050, we'll have the political will to do it, and we really will make a difference. And it will be possible to have the US take leadership role again. Now, I was on the board of directors for National Audubon for 9 years. And I talk about the fact that we need to have turbines. And Audubon folks will say, oh my gosh, Terry, we can't have turbines, those kill birds. Well, they did a study and they found when they look at songbirds that turbines actually kill between 3.5 and 3.7 small passerine birds per turbine per year, not per day, not per week, not per month, per year. Now they do kill bigger birds, but now there is technology out there that they are figuring out how to stop that. And that has pretty much stopped. The things that they're killing now are bats, and that's a tougher nut to crack, but we're working on that with the technology. We're working on that. So what I say to people when they say, oh my God, we can't have turbines because they're killing birds, I ask them, well, folks, do you have a cat? Cats are what are killing our birds. 2.4 billion birds are killed by cats each year. We have 80 million feral cats in the US, and we also happen to have 80 million pet cats in the US. Now, if you have a pet cat, that's wonderful. Just don't let it outside. If you have to let it outside, only let it outside during the daytime, not at night, because it kills baby birds at night. So what you need to do is, if we really want to do something about all the birds that are being killed, is we have to take on cats. That's a tough one. That's a political non-starter right now. Maybe it won't be in 10 years, but it is right now. So now let's look at the rest of the things on this plot. We have windows, birds that are running into windows. It's killing almost 600 million birds. Cars that are hitting birds are 2 million. They're hitting power lines, 25 million. Hitting towers, 6.6 million. They're being electrocuted, 5.6 million. Turbines. Look at that. How many birds are being killed by turbines? 234,000 compared to 2.4 billion. So turbines, we have to have turbines, because turbines are going to stop us from losing species, entire species, not just individuals. Now, the other transportation sector, the other sector we need to be worrying about is transportation. We have to have low emission vehicles. By 2030, we need to have 5% of our fleet be low emission vehicles. Can we do that? Yeah, we sure can, because we already have. We're already at about 7 to 9, something like that. By 2050, it needs to be 35 to 65. Can we do that? Hands down. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. We can do that. Tesla has made sure that America is doing that, and now they're getting the competition to do in Germany and all over the world. So yes, transportation sector, check, we can do that. What I'd like you to do is make me another pact. Please, the next car that you buy, make sure that it plugs in. It can be an all-electric car. We have an all-electric car. It's wonderful. We charge it with our solar panels, so we have free electricity to charge our car with. And the other thing is, if you don't want an all-electric vehicle, then get a plug-in hybrid. But please make sure that you get about 30 to 50 miles just on electricity, because that's about what people do for their normal running around town for their errands. Another sector that we need to be worrying about is agriculture. What we can do with agriculture is do plant-based diet, and that's something we really can do something about. Having so much beef and so much dairy, many dairy cows, that's what's causing that problem, and we can do something about it. So now let's look at it on this chart again, what we all of us need to do. For electricity, we need to be supporting renewables, rooftop solar, wind farms. When you have an appliance that you need to replace, make sure you only buy Energy Star appliances that are highly rated. You can do that by our government. Our government has Energy Star. The other thing is, if you have incandescent light bulbs, throw them in the landfill. They are better in the landfill than burning in your house. And I actually threw away incandescent light bulbs this season, and it was because of my Christmas tree bulbs. Transportation, electric vehicles. Can we do that? All of us can do that. Our next cars are going to be electric or plug-in, one of the two. What about agriculture? We can all do something like meatless Mondays. When I was a kid, my grandmother was a Roman Catholic, and she used to only eat fish on Fridays. Well, if she can eat fish on Fridays, I can have a meatless Monday, and maybe a meatless Thursday, and maybe a meatless Saturday. Or I have a friend that says she picks one meal a day and has no meat and no dairy in that meal. That's a way of doing it. Now, if you have to have beef, please, please, please get the beef that is actually certified to be sustaining for grassland birds by Audubon. And the place you can do that is bluenestbeef.com. And what they do is Audubon certifies that the grassland birds that are living on their ranges are actually increasing in abundance, not decreasing in abundance. So it's a very, very good program, and we need to be supporting it. So please go to bluenestbeef.com. You can order it online. It will be delivered right to your door. It's a fantastic place to get beef if you have to eat beef. What about commercial and residential? We have the know-how to build buildings that are zero emission. We should never allow our county commissioners, our city commissioners, to allow any building to be built that is not zero emission from now on. That has to be changed. We all need to be talking to our city council and our county commissioners so that they change the development rules, particularly here in Florida. At least that's true in Sarasota County. Now we come to industry, and that, folks, as I said, is a real tough nut to crack. And what I've said is we need to be planting trees. So please go and get the trees. They're free for you. That's what they were talking about at the very beginning. Plant those trees. We need those trees planted to be able to help save the world. I'm not kidding. It is really that important. And there are places where you can go to offset your carbon footprint. There's a lot of them online. A lot of them are not good because they plant the wrong kind of trees and they plant them in the wrong way. I've done a lot of research, and the best one that I can find is a place called cooleffect.org. And you go on and it will tell you, it will help you determine what your carbon footprint is. You pay money and you can offset that carbon footprint. So what I do for Christmas presents, for birthday presents, for wedding presents, I go to cooleffect.org, and what I do is I pay for their carbon footprint for a year, and people love it. It's a fantastic, absolutely fantastic present to be given. And we need to be doing this because we all can, and it will help save the world. I'm not kidding. It will truly help save the world. Now, most of you can remember when the very first time you saw this picture. It was taken on Christmas Eve, 1968. I can remember the first time I saw it, and I got goosebumps. And all I could think about was, look how fragile our planet is. Look at that. It's so fragile. It is fragile. And we are pushing the bounds right now. And we do need to step up, and step up immediately to make some changes. Can we do that? Absolutely. Each and every one of us can do that. And we need to be doing that as soon as we possibly can. And now with that, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I truly, truly appreciate the invitation to be able to give my spiel to you all tonight and to get you all on board. Thank you very much.
Fantastic talk. Appreciate it so much, Terry. Can we do a few, what about in the chat area, Mary? Can you bring up any discussion?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One, really good info. How can we share this presentation? So we have someone who wants to share what we saw tonight.
I can get you the slides if you want them, or I can also get you I gave a very similar talk to the library in River Falls, Wisconsin, and they have it as a video. They have it as a YouTube, and you can listen to it that way. But I'm happy to get people slides if they want them. That's absolutely no trouble. Mary, I can send you the slides.
Okay, we are also recording this meeting, Dr. Baker. I don't know if we can put that on our website and link to it.
It would be up to Terry if it'd be all right with her.
Sure, it's absolutely fine with me. The more the merrier.
Good, yeah, we'll have that. It has to be up on our website, that's for sure.
Woo-hoo, good.
It was fantastic. You covered so many nice areas. Any other comments?
Yes, I had one person comment rather early on. Professor, and I'm going to get this name wrong, I'm sorry, Robert Budemeyer has noted if everyone on the planet were to drop dead right now, it would take over 100 years for the CO2 already in the atmosphere to stabilize. Therefore, should we not be spending our time on mitigation strategies as well as reducing CO2 emissions?
Okay, it would take not quite 100 years, but yeah, I get the point of what he's saying. It is true. It's like that red curve that I showed you. If God clicked her fingers and stopped all the CO2 going up into the atmosphere, is exactly what he's talking about. And yes, what we need to be doing is trying to stop all the CO2 from going up. So if we can mitigate it, it would be very, very helpful. Coming up with ways to clean CO2 out of the atmosphere is tough. The technology is very tough because it turns out it takes more energy to move the air through whatever the mechanism is to take the CO2 out. So it's very energy expensive. And so you're still, you're still using energy. So that's a tough one. But yes, there are different ways to go about it. And I do agree with the person who said that. Yes.
Okay. I have more questions.
Fine.
As some species are lost to climate change, might other species appear?
Okay, that's a really good question. And it has been a normal everyday knee-jerk reaction to say, when we've had mass extinctions, then after a while, we have this radiation of all these species that come about. Well, there's problems with that. It takes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years for that to happen. And now they're showing that just because you have all this empty space where all the species used to be, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be filling that space again. So yes, we will have other species joining us, but it is going to take hundreds of thousands of years. And I'm not sure we want to wait that long. And I'm still not sure I want to cause the extinction of all those species that are there already.
Right, right. I had someone ask, what about carbon sequestration?
Carbon sequestration is a very important thing. What that means is you take the carbon out of something, like you scrub it out of the plumes from the coal-fired power plants, and then you put it down into the ground and make it stay. It works if it is solid, but it doesn't work if it's CO2. And the oil and gas companies are trying to say, oh, it's fine if we put CO2 down into the ground. It's not fine because what they're doing is they're putting it down old gas oil drilling areas, and it's popping up, it's coming back up other places. So when it's solid, it works. When it's not solid, it doesn't work. Now, something they have found is if they take CO2 gas and they mix it when they're mixing cement, it actually it gets enclosed in the cement, it stays in the cement, and it actually makes the cement harder. So there are things that we can do, and that's a good way to sequester it. And we're just starting to do that now.
Okay. Someone noted, we need to stress energy conservation as our usage has been rising with all our electronics. Conservation can eliminate the need for more power plants.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to be increasing our efficiency. We need to be increasing or decreasing our use. And it's something that we need to be doing a lot with technology. And there's things that we can do about that. But right now, what we need to be doing right now, what we could do quickly is renewables. And I think that's the way to go. I can't believe we live in Florida in the Sunshine State, and we are so far behind in not having solar. It is a real crying shame. We have Florida Power and Light, and they have just been horrible. I put solar on my husband and I put solar on our house, and they have just been really horrible about it. It's ridiculous. I buy power from them at 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and I sell back power to them at 2 cents a kilowatt hour. When I had solar in California, it was 12 cents to 10 cents. So anyway, there's a lot we can do just in Florida.
What kind of metrics should we look for when we see articles like, quote, amazing new technology to solve climate change or whatnot?
Look at the fine print. Look who's doing it. That's the other thing. I was thrilled to see that Total and BP have come out of the petroleum community. They've broken away from the American Petroleum Company. I don't remember what it's called now. What you need to be doing is understanding how much energy they are using for whatever you're talking about, that technology, and make sure that whatever energy they're using something that is renewable.
Okay. Let's see. The person said, I wasn't referring to ways to recapture carbon. I was hoping for recommendations about how best to physically mitigate against sea level rise, for example.
How to mitigate against sea level rise. The best way to mitigate against sea level rise in my life, at least what I've been doing, is really pushing hard at getting everybody off of the fossil fuel addiction. And I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but that's what I have chosen to do. That's what I have chosen to focus on, is trying to get us off of the fossil fuel addiction. I also give a talk that is about wildlife and plastics, and telling people what we need to do to get ourselves off, wean ourselves off of plastics. That's another big, huge use of fossil fuel. Anything that you use that uses fossil fuel, you need to try to crank down as much as you possibly can.
That talk that talk you said that you give on weaning ourselves off plastic, is that available online somewhere?
Good question. I don't think anybody has recorded that one. I've given most of those live. I haven't given many of those since the pandemic has hit. So I don't think so. I can look, Mary, and find out. And if it is, I'll let you know. Or
Okay.
you can ask me to come back and I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we will do that. That's
All
for
right,
sure.
excellent.
Plastics are really a big problem
Yeah.
in the ocean and everything. It's
Absolutely.
I still have more questions. I'm sorry. So the first thing,
everybody else is.
yeah, is population growth related to carbon change a taboo topic? We don't hear it discussed often.
I used to always have a slide on human population and say, hey, folks, this is the real reason that we're having trouble, is because we have so many people on the planet. But it turns out that people would focus on that, get angry at me for saying that, and wouldn't listen to the rest of my talk. So I took it out. But I'm so thrilled that you brought it up in the questions, because that really, truly is the elephant in the room. We need to decrease the number of people on our planet, and we've got to do it soon. A lot, when I was teaching at the University of Michigan, I also taught it at Stanford University. The number of women who were my students that came up to me and said that they were only going to have one child, or maybe have none, like I've done, was increasing every year that I was teaching. So we really need to make people aware that we've got a population problem, a huge population problem that we have to somehow get our arms around. How do you do it? I do not know. It's just like when I was on the board of Audubon and going up to the president of Audubon and saying, we've got to take on cats. He looked at me and he laughed and he says, I'll take on the turbines, but I won't take on the cats. It has to be you have to get to a political place where that can happen. We're not in a place where a political place where that can happen. Right now, actually, in 2 days, we'll be in a place where we can take on climate change again. We can become the leaders in the field again in climate change. And maybe as we do that, after a while, maybe after 10 years, 20 years, maybe we will be able to take on the issue of population, but you can't do it right now. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. Someone asked, can you give an explanation of why we need birds to live, not just for beauty?
Why we need them to live? Oh my
Yes.
God. Do you want to avoid dengue? Do you want to avoid malaria? You need to have birds that are going to be out there eating them. We have to have bats out there that are eating them. Oh my gosh, all the different things that the birds provide in our ecosystems. They make the ecosystems run and work. They poop and they fertilize our plants that are cleaning our water and cleaning the air. Oh my heavens, you could go on and on forever.
Well, Terry, you made a good point, because I know at Audubon House, Dr. Baker showed me where we'd had a rabbit that was killed and the vultures cleaned it out within a couple of hours.
Perfect.
And, we think of birds, we think of, the pretty songbirds and everything, but we also have those other birds that are helping out
Absolutely.
by doing those jobs.
And the songbirds are eating, the vectors that are carrying horrible things. So,
Right. And someone else said, thank you for your presentation. It was very well done and included data that I've not seen before.
Oh, good.
And those are all the questions I have.